These are the 10 saddest South Park episodes of all time. At number 10 is Kenny Dies, an episode about South Park actually killing Kenny for real. The boys find out that Kenny has been diagnosed with a terminal disease, which, while not named in the show, is confirmed to be muscular dystrophy, a group of diseases that cause a loss of muscle mass. Everyone is shocked by the news, and everyone except Stan tries their best to be hopeful for Kenny's survival. However, Stan is just too upset to be near Kenny in his state and refuses to even visit him. Meanwhile, in an abortion clinic, a woman is giving her permission for scientists to use her dead fetus for stem cell research. However, during the transport of the fetuses, the driver swerves and falls off a mountain road due to a deer running across the road. Eric, who happens to be passing by the crash at that same exact moment, then steals the fetuses, hoping that he'd be able to resell them and get a huge profit from it. But ultimately, it doesn't work, and Eric decides to restore them for stem cell research instead. You see, now that's the right choice. When a researcher explains to him about how the studies actually work, he realizes that the stem cell research might also be used to help Kenny recover from his illness. He then thinks that the research could also be used to duplicate a Shakey's pizza. Okay, come on, stay focused. So later that week, Eric goes to the government court and gives a very thoughtful speech to the House of Representatives, requesting that the ban be lifted. The House eventually decides to lift the ban, and so then Eric began to visit many abortion clinics throughout the area in order to collect even more aborted fetuses for the research. Meanwhile, Stan also finds out that stem cell research has been made legal again, and with the hope that a cure might be found, he rushes to visit Kenny. Unfortunately, Kenny's hospital room is empty, and the teddy bear he was given is on the floor. Kyle then walks next to him and says, Kenny just stopped breathing, and it was over. He also adds that Kenny's last words were, "Where's Stan?" Wow, that's how you make a grown man cry. At the funeral, Stan feels extremely guilty over not seeing Kenny before he died, and considers himself to have been Kenny's worst friend. As the funeral takes place, though, Eric comes rushing in and drags Stan and Kyle out of the ceremony, explaining that they have to see the miracle that had just occurred. The boys are shocked and disgusted to see that instead of using the stem cells to save Kenny, Eric only wanted them so he could duplicate a Shakey's pizza. So, as you can imagine, Kyle is absolutely furious that Eric used Kenny's illness and death just so he could have his own Shakey's, and launches a furious beating at him. While Stan feels better now that he knows that it was Eric who was actually Kenny's worst friend. Moving on to number 9, an episode about Stan losing all his friends in You're Getting Old. At Stan's 10th birthday party, his present from Kyle is the latest CD from a tween wave band, but Sharon, Stan's mom, forbids Stan from listening to the CD because she thinks it's not good music. His parents argue over the matter, with Randy claiming that Sharon simply dismisses anything from younger generations. Now angry, Sharon yells at Randy to listen to the CD since she's so confident it's trash. So then Randy goes to listen to the CD, which to the viewer is literally just the sound of drum beats and poop sounds. I'm not joking, you know what show you're watching. However, Randy claims to enjoy the CD, but Sharon doesn't believe him, and still doesn't let Stan listen to it. As tween wave music becomes popular, Sharon and the other boys' parents forbid them from listening to any of it, and try to play for them a song made in their time as an example of what they consider to be good music. To the boys and the viewer, however, it literally sounds like people pooping on the soundtrack, just as the teen wave music is presented as sounding to the adults. That night, Stan secretly listens to the confiscated music, but discovers, to his confusion, that it now too sounds like shit. Stan goes to the doctor who, after examining him, diagnoses him as a cynical asshole, which came from listening to that music. I wouldn't even know how to respond to that, dude. From ice cream to movie trailers, Stan can now only see the bad in things, and this negative outlook alienates him from Kyle, Kenny, and Eric, who begin avoiding him. When Stan catches them secretly going to the movies without him after lying about having the flu, he comes along, only for his attitude to ruin the trailers, and Kyle, Kenny, and Eric leave the theater. Eric then coldly informs Stan that they do not want to hang out with him anymore and leaves with Kenny. As Stan and Kyle argue over this, Stan literally sees Kyle as a large piece of dookie that defecates instead of talking, indicating that he sees them as literal shit. Realizing he now sees them as he does everything else, he just walks away. Meanwhile, Sharon accuses Randy of only liking modern music since he always wanted to be a musician since he was a kid. However, Randy completely ignores her and starts performing tween wave music at the local bowling alley under the name Steamy Ray Vaughan. Once Sharon catches Randy performing, this results in a huge argument. She grills him for the various fads that he has often briefly taken with over the years, such as playing World of Warcraft and becoming a celebrity chef. Wait, what? Randy replies that he has been unhappy for a long time for the reasoning of constantly changing his aspirations. Sharon says that she shares his unhappiness, and the two admit that they seem pretty bad for each other. Later, Sharon and Randy separate and sell their house, with Stan, Sharon, and Shelley moving into a new home. Stan, now completely alienated from his friends, shows no signs of changing and stays lonely. All of this, mind you, from just a CD. At number 8 is an episode that led to Kyle attempting to burn down his entire school. Titled The List, the boys discover that the girls in their class have made a list of them, ordered by cuteness. The boys, after 2 attempts, eventually succeed in stealing said list and discover it ranks Clyde as the cutest and Kyle as the ugliest, with Eric just above him. Kyle's spirits plummet after this discovery, while Clyde's ego inflates dramatically and he starts flirting with many of the girls at school. He takes pity on Kyle and kindly reassures him that Abraham Lincoln, who was also apparently ugly, accomplished so much. Kyle, in an act of depression, starts hanging out with the ugly kids and gets the idea from a boy named Jamal to burn the school down. Kyle is then visited by the ghost of Abraham Lincoln, who shows him that ugliness can be a blessing in disguise. Ugly people like Jamal have nothing handed to them and they must earn what they seek. Kyle, however, still decides to go ahead with his plans of burning the school down. So Stan then begins to watch Kyle's behavior attentively. Eventually, he asks his ex-girlfriend Wendy why Kyle was voted ugliest. Wendy begins investigating and discovers that the ballots were rigged in Clyde's favor. Since Clyde's father owns a shoe store, some of the girls wanted to make Clyde popular to justify dating him and getting free shoes. They hid the real list and forged a new one, meaning that the girls let the boys steal the list. Wendy steals the real list from them, and she and Stan run off to find Kyle, who is just about to set the school on fire. Stan and Wendy explain the truth to Kyle, and that's when Bebe shows up and holds them at gunpoint for exposing the girls' real list. But it turns out that Wendy has called the police, who arrive almost at once. That's unheard of. Bebe is shocked, to say the least, which Wendy takes advantage of to wrestle the gun from them. A shot goes off. However, neither Wendy nor Bebe are hurt. The bullet flies off, somehow killing Kenny at home instead. Bebe is arrested and the list is burned after Kyle refuses to take a look at the real list, fearing an inflated ego that Abraham Lincoln's ghost warned him about. That's a pretty smart choice. Now for an episode that showed Eric is much worse of a person than anyone realized in Cash for Gold. Eric finds out that Stan's grandfather Marvin gives him a bejeweled bolo tie covered in diamonds and gold, saying that the Jewels and Gems shopping network claimed it's worth $6,000. So then Stan takes it to a Cash for Gold store where he is then offered $15 for it. Other merchants similarly offer him little to nothing for the item, and Stan realizes that his grandfather has been sold a fake. Eric shows his friends the Jewels and Gems infomercials where senior citizens are conned into buying cheap jewelry for their relatives at outrageous prices. That prompts Eric to get into the infomercial business, with Butters as his sidekick, and not only starts offering his classmates Cash for Gold, he also sets up his own television channel and mimics the tone and techniques of Dean, the host on J&G. After selling out, he visits a jewelry shop to restock, but he then notices the East Asian women at the shop are using the very same mannerisms that he and Dean use, thus revealing they are scam artists as well. So Eric instead goes to a factory in India where the jewelry is made, intending to buy directly from them, and finds Stan is there as well, complaining about what they're doing. Selling the elderly fake jewelry is not a nice thing to do. And then in a montage, it's revealed that the business is a continuous loop. The jewelry made at the factory is shipped to the United States, where scam artists sell it to senior citizens, who give them as gifts to relatives. The relatives sell the gifts for cash, and the gold and gems are separated and shipped back to the India factory where the gold is melted down so it can be made into new jewelry. An employee at the factory gives Stan a picture frame, which he accepts. Stan presents Marvin with a photo of Marvin and his deceased dog Patches in the frame. Marvin then notices Stan's tie, not remembering having given it to him, and he tells him it's gay. Stan then replies that he will not wear it anymore. Come on, Stan, still wear it for Grandpa. At number 6 is the episode Asbergers, which is about the time when Stan's life almost got ruined after a misdiagnosis by a doctor. Stan is attempting to adapt to his parents' divorce, but his sadness is taking over him, causing him to have outbursts in class. And so, after going to a doctor for help, he accidentally diagnosed Stan with Asperger's due to his depression. Taken to an Asperger's group therapy center, Stan is greeted by a doctor who introduces him to the other patients, all exhibiting an assortment of odd behaviors. When left alone, though, all these people quickly drop their act, and the false doctor reveals that not only do none of these patients have the condition, they don't even believe it exists. Stan learns that the center is actually a front for freedom fighters who basically believe that the world has gone to poop and that some kind of supernatural force is preventing the rest of the world from noticing. Yeah, very interesting people. The leader, who is a parody of Morpheus from The Matrix, gives Stan a glass of whiskey as a serum so he can interact with the illusion world. While drunk, he cheerfully embraces the world and enjoys a screening of Jack and Jill. As this occurs, Eric, upon mishearing the condition as Asbergers, attempts to fake this condition at school by stuffing his underwear with hamburgers. Although this fails spectacularly, Eric gives one of the hamburgers to Kyle, who declares them delicious without knowing that Eric had them in his frackin' pants. This inspires Eric to start a food stand with Kyle called Cartman Burger, at which he will sell hamburgers that have their flavor enhanced by being placed inside Eric's underwear. The next day, Stan is armed and breaks into a secret meeting being attended by corporate representatives of America's most popular fast food chains, which have lost business due to the popularity of Cartman Burger. The representatives deduce that Cartman Burgers contain ingredients from all of their products, which are infused into Cartman Burgers via some type of gas. When Stan arrives and loses consciousness from the alcohol, the restaurant agents tie him up and interrogate him about this secret ingredient, since they knew he was friends with him. As Stan does not know this ingredient, the representatives instead monitor a conversation between him and Kyle over the ingredient. But when Kyle tells Stan that only Eric knows the secret ingredient, the restaurant agents storm the stand before the severely drunk freedom fighters arrive and gun them down. Stan, however, refuses to drink any more whiskey and realizes that although he may no longer be with both of his parents and Kyle's no longer his best friend, he is now excited by embracing his current situation instead of hiding from it. But then Randy appears and announces that he and Sharon have worked out their differences and are getting back together. This very much surprises Stan, and then a montage happens and everything just returns back to normal. The Marshes move back into their home together, Stan gets back with his girlfriend Wendy, and Kyle breaks off his friendship with Eric and gets Cartman Burger shut down after finding out what the secret ingredient really is. Pretty good ending, not gonna lie. At number 5, we got one of the craziest episodes in South Park history, called The Poor Kid. It begins with Kenny's parents, Stuart and Carol, getting arrested for having a meth lab at their home. Great way to start. As a result, Kenny and his two siblings, Kevin and Karen, are put into the foster care system. Their caseworker, Mr. Adams, places them with the Weatherheads, an aggressive couple living in Greeley that forbids their numerous foster children from expressing any notions of confidence whatsoever. Because of Karen's sadness and fear over their new living situation, Kenny attempts to protect and comfort her by adopting his superhero persona of Mysterion, whom she comes to see as her guardian angel. Meanwhile, Eric is horrified to discover through Butter's research that he is now the poorest student in school since Kenny moved. He fears that Kyle will start making fun of him now. Despite Kyle's lack of interest in doing so, Eric begins to tell poor jokes about himself to beat Kyle to the punch. But that is still not enough for Eric, so he complains to his mother Lyanne, but she says that she's already working 2 jobs and can't do more because of this economy. Wishing he were in a foster home like Kenny, Eric frames her for running a meth lab too, and despite her protests of not having done drugs in a very long time, she's arrested. Eric was then placed with the Weatherheads and attends the same school in Greeley as Kenny, where he is happy to discover that the poorest student there is not he nor Kenny, but a boy named Jacob Hallery, whom Eric takes delight in making fun of. After Kenny, as Mysterion, beats a bully who was harassing Karen, she and the other foster kids report what they saw to the Weatherheads, who torture one of the kids by hosing him down with Dr. Pepper for expressing such certainty they saw an angel. But if you ask me, that is not torture at all. In response to the Weatherheads' cruelty, Eric reports them to Child Protective Services. Mr. Adams comes to the children's rescue, as does Mysterion, who plants Pabst Blue Ribbon in their fridge, on which the Weatherheads get drunk. They are then arrested for being unfit guardians. Adams urges the police to return all the foster kids to their parents, as the foster care system has been embarrassed. So then Kenny and Eric return home. I do feel bad for the kids, but I mean, luckily they're with their parents now, I guess. Number 4 is an episode called Safe Space, which is about Eric getting bullied. Eric is in PC Principal's office, crying after receiving negative comments for his appearance in a picture he posted online of himself wearing only underwear in lifting weights. Principal suggests having another student filter out negative comments on Eric's social media accounts and print out only the positive ones to Eric. He agrees, and the principal asks Kyle, Wendy, and Butters to filter out the negative comments. Kyle and Wendy get 2 weeks of detention when they refuse, but Butters, fearful of being grounded by his parents, agrees. So principal holds a student assembly featuring guest speaker Steven Seagal, who tells the students that he has also been a victim of body shaming like Eric. Therefore, the principal orders Butters to help Seagal in the same manner he's been helping Eric. Eventually, Butters is filtering negative comments for an increasingly large number of people, including Demi Lovato and Vin Diesel, which requires him to stay up late at night and suffer from sleep deprivation. We then see Randy, who's at the Whole Foods market, pressured by a cashier to give additional money for poor starving children while paying for groceries. The cashier continues increasingly pressuring him to make donations in his subsequent visits until he finally makes a donation, but is then embarrassed again by the cashier for only giving $1 to charity. So Randy and the others make a commercial to support a shameless America in which citizens are not criticized for any of their attributes or actions. In order to pressure the Whole Foods market cashier to stop asking him for donations, Randy tells him that he is hosting a charity fundraiser dinner for his shameless America. The cashier literally just brushes him off and continues on with his job. Yeah, that was probably the best move. Meanwhile, a sleep-deprived Butters begins hallucinating that reality is appearing in his room and threatening him. This results in a traumatized Butters running to his school in the nude and jumping out of a fracking window, for which he is then hospitalized, since he was so scared of reality. Later, at the charity dinner, it was also disrupted by reality, who angrily tells the guests what has happened to Butters as a result of their relegating all the negativity directed towards them to Butters. In response, they make a new commercial to help raise money for iPads for poor starving children so that they can filter negative comments from the fundraiser's social media accounts. And not gonna lie, that's actually pretty smart. At number 3 is Raisins, the episode where Stan got dumped by his girlfriend. The boys are playing football at recess when Bebe suddenly tells Stan that his girlfriend Wendy has decided to break up with him. Stan asks if he's done something wrong, to which Bebe replies that Wendy just simply doesn't want to be with him anymore. And just like that, Stan soon falls into a deep depression. To cheer him up, his friends take him to the restaurant Raisins, where all of the employees are hot chicks. Their words, not mine. This doesn't work well, and Stan asks Bebe for help to get Wendy back. Bebe tells Stan to play a Peter Gabriel song loudly outside her house. That surely must work. However, when doing this, he discovers that Wendy has already begun a relationship with Tolkien, which just breaks the poor kid. The next day, he decides to socialize with his elementary school's group of goth kids. He begins wearing dark clothes, consuming large amounts of coffee, and just delving deeper into his sadness. Then the episode shifts to Butters, who is falling in love with a waitress at Raisins named Alexis. He just obsesses over her and begins to spend all of his parents' money at the restaurant. Butters' parents, delighted that their son didn't turn out to be gay, decide to come with Butters to meet his girlfriend, but discover that she's just been using him for money. And though they explain this to him, Butters tells his parents off. He don't care. He reveals that he has plans to move in with Alexis, who then bluntly tells him that she was never his girlfriend. So yeah, that also makes Butters depressed, and the goth kids invite him to join their clique. That's something. He refuses though, noting that though he is upset, he's at least happy that he can feel sadness as it makes him feel more alive. Dang. Stan adopts Butters' point of view and emerges from his own depression. The next day, he rejoins his friends for football and tells Kyle that he'll handle his future problems in the right way, by insulting his ex and her boyfriend. And you know, I don't know why I didn't expect that answer. And number 2 is the time when Eric violated Butters when he was asleep in the episode of Eric Sucks. It starts with Eric having developed a hobby of taking pictures of Butters in often demeaning positions while he sleeps over, which he excitedly shares with Stan, Kenny, and Kyle at the bus stop. One photograph in particular depicts Eric smiling and performing a thumbs up with Butters' penis in his mouth, which he claims makes Butters gay. However, Kyle thinks Eric is the one gay for giving Butters oral instead. Man, what the hell am I reading? Eric, knowing that Kyle is right, is tricked into taking a similar picture with his and Butters' positions switched for the reason that it'll cancel the gay polarity. Eric really believes this, so he runs back to Butters' house, attempting to trick him into allowing himself to be blindfolded and opening his mouth. Butters is initially skeptical, as anyone would be in this type of situation, but that was until Eric assures him that he won't put anything yicky in his mouth. As he's about to insert his penis into Butters' mouth, Butters' dad, Steven, walks in on them and panics as Eric flees. Steven declares that Butters is officially bi-curious, which really confused Butters since he had no idea what was going on. Steven explains that it means that his son is simply confused, and you know what? Butters agrees. He is indeed confused about the events which he has been unable to observe. Steven takes him to Camp New Grace, a Christian conversion therapy camp, which organizers repeatedly reinforce the idea that the boys there are just confused. The camp is filled with miserable young boys, and the counselors are uncaring. Butters befriends his roommate, who is a nervous and insecure boy called Bradley. But soon, Bradley would develop a crush on Butters. He concludes that he is beyond hope and decides to end himself. Whoa! Butters and the camp staff find Bradley on the outer ledge of a bridge and try to persuade him to come down. Bradley ultimately, thankfully, decides not to commit suicide and comes down after being inspired by Butters' confidence once he voices his belief that the staff's thoughts of confusion are simply a projection of their own confusion. Seeing that Butters is happy being bi-curious, Steven admits that he is also bi-curious and that he enjoys his curiosity. The statement prompts a shared laugh between the two, but Butters winds up legitimately confused. He's got no idea what his father is referring to. Meanwhile, Eric decides to throw away the picture of him with Butters' penis in his mouth after having discovered that Kyle was tricking him the entire time. However, he's got Stan, Kyle, and Kenny pointing out that they already know about it, and then they proceed to blackmail Eric into being nice to them. Well, Eric refuses, claiming the task to be way too difficult and decides to Photoshop the picture so it would look like Kyle with the penis in his mouth, thus shifting potential accusations of being gay to him. When Eric is unable to retrieve the picture to Photoshop it, he convinces himself that Kyle has stolen it in order to show it at school during show and tell. Kyle's attempts to convince Eric that he has not stolen it are unsuccessful though, as are the other avenues through which Eric attempts to recover it from him. However, when Eric presents a series of artistic photographs during show and tell, the final photo was actually that of Eric with Butters' penis in his mouth, which, safe to say, shocked his classmates and teacher, Mrs. Garrison. Suddenly, Mr. Mackey comes to the classroom and relays a message to Eric from his mother. She found the original photograph under his desk at home. Eric's humiliation is completed as Kyle glares at him. GG. And at number 1 is an episode called Best Friends Forever, which gets progressively sadder the more we watch. Kenny is the first person in South Park to have a new PlayStation Portable. Kenny quickly works his way up to level 60 of the game Heaven vs. Hell, but soon after is ran over by an ice cream truck and dies. Yeah, that escalated pretty fast. After entering Heaven, Kenny learns that God had created the PlayStation Portable to search for what the angels call our Keanu Reeves, the person who can command his legions against Satan's forces in a manner like that of the video game. Kenny agrees to take the challenge to fight against Satan's army, but Kenny is revived in real life just after hearing this. Because he had been dead for so long, he can't talk or communicate and has suffered permanent brain damage. He has to be kept alive through the use of a feeding tube. The reading of Kenny's will to Kyle, Stan, and Eric is interrupted by the announcement that Kenny is actually still alive. The lawyer mentions a passage about Kenny's wishes in the event of him being in a vegetative state, but the last page of the will is missing, preventing them from finding out what his wishes were. So of course, upon hearing this, Eric claims his status as Kenny's best friend forever to the Colorado court to get an order to take out the feeding tube so Eric can get the PSP upon Kenny's death. Stan and Kyle, along with Kenny's parents and other protesters, wage a media war to put the feeding tube back in and keep Kenny alive, while Eric enlists his supporters to get Kenny's feeding tube removed. Kyle then realizes they should not have made this issue into such a media circus and concludes that Kenny should be taken off his feeding tube, commenting that Eric was right for the wrong reasons. Everyone in the hospital room agrees with Kyle and quietly leaves, allowing Kenny to die. Kenny returns to heaven just in time to command the angels to victory using a golden PSP. After the victory, Kenny is presented with a golden statue of Keanu Reeves as a reward for defeating Satan's army. A sentence I never thought I'd ever have to say in my entire life. But don't let that take away from the fact that that is a pretty nice statue. Well deserved for everything he had to deal with in this episode. Now, if I missed any episodes, let me know in the comments down below and I'll make a part 2. Thanks